not just directly. Okay, so we should be
Okay.
connected. Let's see, and it says we're live, so awesome, I guess. Everything managed to be hooked up correctly. So thank you everyone for joining. It's actually been a while since we had a GDG Osijek event, so I'm really happy that we managed to organize something, and we have a really wonderful speaker today to talk about XML and Compose, or rather how they transformed their application from XML to Compose, and like all the findings along the way, I guess. So I mean, I can't describe it better than you, Ahmed. So can you introduce yourself a bit, and then jump into the presentation? And in terms of the presentation, whenever you're ready, just feel free to share your screen, and yeah, we'll kick it off.
Cool. Thanks so much, Philippe. Yeah, so I am Ahmed Tikiwa. I am a senior software engineer at a company called Luno. I am based in Cape Town in South Africa. And yeah, I've been a software engineer since probably 2010. And I started off using PHP, mainly specializing in backend development, and later on purely focused on Android development. So yes, this has been me. Yeah, I'm just trying to share my screen, and it seems like Chrome does not want me to. Okay, so I'm just going to, I might need to just leave and then come back, Philippe.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Just for a second.
Yeah.
Just for a second.
Okay, just a second then.
Okay. Okay. Good. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Okay, apologies for the technical difficulties, folks. I guess this happens when you want to. Okay. Okay, Ahmed will be right back. So once he joins, we'll be able to continue. Let's see.
Excellent. All right. Huge apologies, everyone, for that. You gotta love it when tech just sometimes either works in your favor or it doesn't. Yes, so it's all good. All right. So tonight I will be giving you a talk on from XML to Compose, and I'll be talking about my journey of transforming an existing large Android app to Jetpack Compose. So let us start. So why Compose, right? Well, most Android development, including my own, included defining layouts using at least one XML file. This XML file would contain a tree of UI widgets, constituting an Android view hierarchy. If the user, for example, interacts with the screen, this would result in a change in the app state and thus a need for the UI hierarchy to be updated to display the current data representing the changed state. However, to update the UI, a function such as find view by ID is used to go through the hierarchy tree, and the internal state of the node, which is the UI widget, is updated through functions like setText or addChild. This manual change of the UI widget is very error prone. For example, trying to set a value to a node that has already been removed from the UI, thus resulting in an unintended exception. The more views that are part of the application, the higher the level of maintenance and complexity. Jetpack Compose was created with the intent to simplify the above and instead accelerate the way in which we develop our UIs using less code and benefiting from a list of powerful tools all in Kotlin, which is really cool. In other words, No more XML-defined views, which is referred to as the imperative approach. Rather, views are now defined in the Kotlin code, referred to as the declarative approach, meaning you now describe your UI. So what are other companies saying about Compose? At Monzo, they're saying it's much easier to trace through code when it's all written in the same language, which is Kotlin, and often the same file, rather than jumping back and forth between Kotlin and XML. At Twitter, our theming layer is vastly more intuitive and legible. We've been able to accomplish within a single Kotlin file what otherwise extended across multiple XML files that were responsible for attribute definitions and assignments via multiple layered theme overlays. So when was Jetpack Compose introduced? I first heard about Jetpack Compose when it was announced as a preview by Google at I/O in 2019. Like any developer, I was excited as I was already using Jetpack libraries extensively as part of my development, with a new one being added to further accelerate or speed up my development. This is what Karen from Google had to say at the time. One of the areas we never solved was UI. We really wanted to look at how could you make it super simple to develop UI. Leland Richardson had this to say. What I think is once people start seeing Compose in action, it really becomes a delightful thing to program. So though I was excited, I was also trying not to feel overwhelmed at the prospect of learning a whole new way of writing UI, as the imperative approach is what I was used to for many years. Due to time constraints, I also delayed learning Jetpack Compose until recently. Learning Compose. So I started learning Jetpack Compose through the course on the Android developers website, which takes you through step by step into understanding the inner workings of Compose, from thinking in Compose, the basics, navigation, theming, animation, integrating with existing apps, all this through articles, videos, and code labs. The course also has a short quiz at the end to test your understanding of Compose, and includes a Jetpack Compose badge, which will be added to your developer profile on successful completion. In addition to this, as I'm a visual learner and with a desire to thoroughly understand Jetpack Compose, I went through 2 paid Jetpack Compose courses on Udemy. This approach is, of course, totally optional, but the extra visual materials helped me. The first was a short course by Katalin Gita, and then the second, a more extensive course by Paolo De Shone, which covers the Kotlin fundamentals for those who either need a refresher or are new to Kotlin, and a series of different apps to help solidify the Compose concepts and how all the components fit together, coupled with state management. Once I was done with my learnings mentioned above, my desire was to now implement Compose into my existing Android app, UpNext TV Series Manager. So, about the app. I created UpNext TV Series Manager in 2015 as a passion project of mine, and it has been in production ever since and available for download from the Google Play Store. The app, UpNext TV Series Manager, is also an open source app, and it's officially part of the Google Developers Dev Library. The app boasts the following screens. It has a dashboard screen showing a schedule of shows that aired the previous day, the current day, as well as the next day, provided by the TV Maze API. Then it also has a search screen, allowing the users to search for shows with the results displayed in a clickable list of cards with data provided by the TV Maze API. An explore screen showing the currently popular, trending, and most anticipated shows provided by the Trackit API. A show details screen showing a summary of the show, cast information, a ratings breakdown from Trackit, previous and next episode information provided by TV Maze and Trackit APIs. Then it also has a list of seasons for a particular show displayed in a list of clickable cards with data also provided by the TV Maze API. Then there'll be a list of episodes for that particular season displayed in a list of clickable cards with data provided by TV Maze API. Then finally, there's a Trackit account screen, which displays one of 2 screens, depending on whether the user is logged into their Trackit account or not. If the user is logged in, their list of UpNext favorited shows will be displayed. adopting Compose, choosing the approach. What makes Jetpack Compose so powerful is that it caters not only to developers creating new apps, but also to developers who have existing apps and would like to include Compose into it. What makes the latter a possibility is the concept of interoperability. What this means is that Jetpack Compose code can live side by side with XML-based code. With that said, adoption can be done in one of two ways, according to the Android developers website. The first approach is called the bottom-up approach, which starts by migrating the smaller UI elements on the screen, like a button or a text view, followed by its view group elements until everything is converted to composable functions. Then the second approach is called the top-down approach, which starts by migrating the fragments or view containers like a frame layout, constraint layout, or recycler view, followed by the smaller elements on the screen. So what does interoperability look like? So each of my fragments has an XML layout view associated with it. Some screens also have an additional layout view for the recycler view items used by their respective recycler view adapter. And then as this is a gradual migration to Compose, where I'm going screen by screen, I will be completely removing fragment files in future and have Compose navigation, where the navigation will be from composable screen to composable screen, as opposed to the current fragment to fragment navigation. Compose view makes it possible to introduce Compose UI content into an existing XML layout. The Compose view acts as a container to host the Compose UI content, thus making it possible for Android views to coexist with the Compose UI in the same XML file, which is really cool. So on this particular screen here, I removed all the Android views, text views, recycler views, nested scroll view, constraint layout, linear progress indicator, and replaced them with the Compose view. So this is how my layout file now looks. All it has is the Compose view. Then once the app makes use of Compose navigation, then the need for Compose view will become redundant. Then in my fragment file, I'm using data binding to reference the Compose view in order to set it up. According to the documentation, by default, whenever the view is detached from the window, Compose disposes of the composition. Compose UI view types such as Compose view and abstract Compose view use what is called a view composition strategy that defines this behavior. To ensure unintended behavior and to ensure that compositions are disposed of automatically where not needed, then set view composition strategy is required, as you see there in the code. Without this, my app actually crashed as I navigated between the composable screens. The set content takes in a composable function as a parameter. In this case, the theme definition MDC theme, which is a library I added to UpNext TV Series Manager. And this library allows you to leverage Compose material into your app without actually immediately migrating your app to the material design for Jetpack Compose. So in my case, I'm still using the old way of defining themes. An MDC theme adapter basically takes that existing theme that's used, defined in the legacy way, and basically creates an adapter for it, creates all the different files that it needs for Jetpack Compose, and then includes it into your app automatically without you having to do anything much. So in this case, MDC theme is a composable as well, which also takes another composable function, in this case, the composable screen, which I created called search screen. So breaking down the changes, starting off with the search screen. My focus on the search screen was the following: updating the search bar to be a composable, updating the search results list, where I create a composable representing a single result item, and then displaying the list of these single result items or composables representing a search result item. Then I will remove the recycler view adapter, the view holder, and the item the item layout view. Basically, this is now part of the migration for this search screen. Then this is how I created the search screen composable, which is a function annotated with @composable. However, you ask, what is a composable? So Jetpack Compose is built around composable functions. And within these functions, you can define your app's UI programmatically by describing the UI of your app, how it should look. And you also provide the data necessary to be displayed. You also, therefore, no longer have to focus on the process of the UI's construction, initializing an element, attaching it to a parent, and so forth. You don't need to do that anymore. Excuse me. So for my composables that represent an entire screen, I like to add screen as part of the name, as you see there. And also notice that the composable function name begins with an uppercase. This is actually the norm or the best practice or the style, the recommended way that you will create your composable functions. So my composable there is called search screen, capital S, as well as capital S again for the screen part. Then for dependency injection, I use hilt in my app. And because my view models are hilt view models, I can pass hilt view model, as you see there, to allow my view model to be provided to the composable. The hilt view model call is part of the hilt navigation compose dependency, which I have included in my app. Then because the data in my view models is currently being returned as live data, I can transform that live data value into state using observer state. Then every time there would be a new value posted into live data, the return state will be updated, causing recomposition of every state.value usage. So state is one of the critical components within Compose. Your composables react to state. When I migrate up next navigation to Compose navigation, I will then use the scaffold layout, which automatically provides slots for the top bar, the bottom bar, as well as maybe a floating action button if I wanted. For now, a surface layout with a modifier such as fill max size which is used there, which allows me to basically fill the entire size, the entire width and the entire height. It's a modifier that you can pass there. Composables can take a modifier, which is a companion object that can help you define properties such as padding or clickability and more for your composable. Then in my surface there, I've defined another composable called the column composable, which is part of the Compose, Jetpack Compose library itself, or the framework. And the column composable arranges the composables contained inside it to be arranged vertically on the screen. In other words, from top to bottom, as you see there in the illustration. And then I want to add a linear progress indicator, but in order to ensure that the list does not jump or shift position on the screen when the linear progress indicator is removed, because you don't always show the linear progress indicator. It only shows when something is happening in the background and then it's gone. So I rather want to display the linear progress indicator on top of the list. That way, when it disappears, the list remains in its position. To achieve this, I use a box composable, which is the equivalent of a frame layout in the imperative approach. The box composable allows views to be on top of each other, as you can see there in the illustration on the left. Then inside my box composable, I have the custom composable called search area. So this is something that I created called search area. Then I also have the linear progress indicator, which is only displayed if the loading state is true. So there I have my state variable is loading, and I'm using that value to determine whether that composable linear progress indicator should be shown or not. So when it's true, it will be recomposed into the screen. When it's not, it's removed from the screen. Then before I explain what's going on here, one concept is very important when it comes to composables. There is a concept of state hoisting, which is the process of moving state all the way to the caller. In that way, ensuring that composables are as stateless as possible. In my case, the caller is my screen. So search screen in this instance. Then the composables below it need to hoist the state up to it as much as possible. There are times state hoisting isn't always possible. However, it's best practice to make sure that your composables are as stateless as possible. Then one thing to bear in mind is that state comes down the composables and events go up. When composables are stateless, it also makes them easier to reuse as well as to test. Then my search area composable will represent the text field for entering the search query as well as the search results. It accepts 3 parameters, the search results list, 2 function arguments on text submit and on result click. These are events that the composable will respond to and hoist up the responsibility to the caller, which is search area, to decide what to do with that event. Then onTickSubmit will be invoked when the user has entered a search query. This event is hoisted up from the search form composable all the way up to search screen, because search screen is the one that will manage all that state. Then onResultClick is an event invoked by the user clicking on the search result items. This event is then hoisted up from search results list composable all the way to search screen. And then here's what the search form composable I created looks like. So on the left there, that's where I'm showing how I'm calling it. And on the right-hand side, that's where I've defined it there. So it has a mutable state variable called search query state. In order to ensure that this state survives the activity or process recreation, using the saved instance state mechanism, I use what is called remember savable. Now the user's query will be remembered in a state variable. So if I rotate my device, that search query will be remembered. Then my search form composable makes use of a search input field composable, which is a composable I created as a simple wrapper function around the material outline text field, which I will show in the next slide. Then the state variable search query state is then used in the input field. Initially, the value will be empty. As you see, that's initialized to an empty string. Then when the user types a value, the onValue change event is invoked, and then the search query state value is updated and also remembered. Then here's what my search input field composable looks like. So on the left-hand side, that's where I'm showing how I'm calling it. And then the right-hand side is actually how I've defined this function. As you can see, it calls the material outline text field, passing it the input label, the value state, which is a mutable state variable of type string. And when the outline text field's onValue change is invoked, then that event is passed up, state hoisting, containing the new value of type string. My search result composable, search result list composable, takes 2 parameters. The list that is to be displayed and a function argument, which will be the onClick event containing the search result item. So on the left, that's where I'm calling it. On the right-hand side is the definition. So search result list then makes use of the lazy column, which is the equivalent of the recycler view, but more powerful under the hood. Also with this, there is no requirement for adapters, view holders, and so forth. Lazy column and its other counterpart, lazy row, simply take a list and inside it, which is called the lazy item scope, so that lambda there, and then you define which composable represents the column or the row for that list, similar to when you'd create an XML layout for a view holder. This time you create a composable that represents that column or row. In the previous slide where I showed the search screen composable, I didn't show the full implementation until I'd covered the above in order to make things clearer first. So this is the full call for the search area composable, where a list is passed to it. And when the search area composable on result click event is invoked, search screen will then call the nav controller as part of the Jetpack navigation library to navigate the show detail screen. So the exciting part, the before and afters. So on the left-hand side is how the search screen looked like without Compose. So this is how it basically looks XML defined. Okay. And this is how it looks as a composable. So Show search, which is at the top there, that toolbar there, as well as the bottom navigation bar, are the imperative versions of that. So those are not composables, but the content in between that, that's fully composed. So the search input field there, where it says suits, that is a composable, and then the search results is also composable. So what I've done there, I've used search form composable to represent the input field where the user will be typing in their query. Then I've created a composable called search results list, which I showed you earlier. And so that then represents the list of shows that will be displayed. And then both these composable search form and search results list are part of search area composable, which I showed earlier as well. Then moving on to the dashboard fragment, this is what it looks like on the left-hand side. So this is the dashboard where you have the shows that aired yesterday, that are airing today, and that are airing tomorrow. And this is how it looks in Jetpack Compose. So I've managed to achieve the same screen using composables. So at the top there, where it says aired yesterday, I'm using shows row, which is a composable I created in order to display my list in a scrollable list, scrolling from left to right, so a horizontally scrolling list. And it's able to do this because of lazy row, which is a composable similar to lazy column, but lazy row allows you to arrange items from left to right in a row format. Then at the bottom, for my airing today, I'm also using the shows row composable. And then for my shows airing tomorrow, I'm also using shows row composable. So I'm able to use the same composable 3 times. So that is also the other beauty of Compose, being able to utilize your composables in multiple screens. So in here, I just pass it a different list and it can display it that way. Then on the left-hand side is my explore screen. And this is how it's defined on the left-hand side using the imperative approach, using the XML version. Then on the right-hand side, this is how it's defined using Compose. And at the top there, I've created a composable called trending shows row, which also uses lazy row, similar to the dashboard fragment. And then at the bottom for popular shows, I've created a composable called popular shows row, which also uses lazy row. And then I've created one for most anticipated shows row, which also uses lazy row to display my list scrolling from left to right. Then this is a show details screen. So this is how it looks like on the left-hand side without any compose. And this is how it looks like on the right-hand side with compose. So on this screen, where I have the main image there, the backdrop image, as well as the title and whether it's running or canceled and all of that, I use a composable called backdrop and title. So that will represent that top part there. And then in the middle part, I've got a composable I created called poster and metadata that will represent the poster, as well as that little bit of metadata information, when it's airing, the genres, and then that attribution information. And then I'm using the normal compose text composable to basically showcase the synopsis of the show. Then this is now below that show synopsis that I showed on the previous slide. So this is how it looks on the left-hand side with the seasons button, the cast information below it, as well as the next and previous episode information below that. And this is how it looks like in Compose. So I've got my seasons button as well as my add favorite button, which is part of a composable called show detailed buttons. So there I can add and remove buttons as I please, and they all form part of that composable which I created. Then the cast information is using a composable called show cast list, another one I created which uses lazy row, similar to the dashboard and explore fragment, to display my list scrolling from left to right. So this cast information can scroll from left to right. Then my previous episode information, I created a composable called previous episode. And then there I've defined the title of the episode as well as the synopsis. I've done the same as well for next episode, where I created a composable for that. Then below the next and previous episode, I've got a ratings breakdown. And this is data provided by Trackit, by the Trackit API. And this is how it looks using Compose on the right-hand side. So as you see there, as I mentioned previously, you've got the previous episode, Composable. And then at the bottom there, I created a composable called Trackit Rating Summary. And so that is basically my way of replicating the functionality I created there using the imperative approach. And then using the linear progress indicator composable, I was able to achieve those ratings there that you see there. And then using a simple text composable to display that overall score as well as the votes. All this achieved using Jetpack Compose. Then the show seasons episodes screen. This is how it looks on the left-hand side, with a list of cards that will display each and every episode with a picture there detailing that particular episode. And this is how it looks like on the right-hand side using Jetpack Compose. So on the screen there, where it says Season 5 episodes, I created a composable called section heading text. This is basically my way of making sure that my headings are standardized across my app. So I created a section heading text, which I can use anywhere across the app. And so my section heading in this case is Season 5 episodes. And then I've got show season episodes composable, which uses lazy column, which I mentioned earlier, which allows me to arrange my views, my composables from top to bottom vertically. And then each composable within show season episodes is represented by a show season episode card. So that is what you see there. Those individual cards are composables with the poster there, or the image, the title of that episode, as well as the synopsis, all that information there. All of that is contained within show season episode card composable, which are then passed to show season episodes to allow it to display it in a list format. Another cool thing about Compose. Then the Trackit account screen. So this is how it looked on the left-hand side using the imperative approach. And this is how it looks on the right-hand side using Jetpack Compose. So as you can see there, I then again use section heading text, which I mentioned previously. So that will then be using your favorite shows as a section heading text. Then I created a composable called favorites list, which uses a different type of composable called lazy vertical grid, which if you're familiar with the Flexbox layout or the grid layout, so this will be similar to that. So lazy vertical grid allows me to organize or display my items in a vertical grid, which is really cool. And then each of the items within favorites list is represented by a composable I created called list poster card. And this is how this particular screen is made up using Compose. So what still needs to be converted or updated? So the toolbar for one, the bottom navigation bar. Secondly, then I need to migrate to Compose navigation. I need to remove surface and replace it with scaffold. I need to replace observer state with mutable state observation. So basically just moving away from that live data observer state. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a preference of mine, just moving to mutable state. And then I'd like to add animations so that I can nicely move or navigate between the different screens with nice animations, just to make things pretty. And then most importantly, I'd like to add tests for the composables. This is very, very possible for Compose. However, the testing or the way you write tests within Compose is now different to how we're used to in the imperative approach. So that there's definitely a different way of thinking when it comes to writing tests. And these are the list of items which I am intending on doing, which I've already actually started. And you can see this in my repository, which I will share the link in just a bit. Then in terms of resources, the official Compose documentation can be found at developer.android.com/jetpack/compose. Then official Compose course, which I mentioned, which I did earlier, it can be found at developer.android.com/courses/pathways/compose. Then Compose layout basics, if you want to just understand better how to arrange things on the screen and so forth. developer.android.com/jetpack/compose/layout/basics. Then state hoisting, which I mentioned is also another important concept within Jetpack Compose. This is where you can find it, /jetpack/compose/state hoisting. Then up next, as I mentioned earlier, the code is available as an open source project and part of the Google Developers Dev Library. So that's the link where you can find it on the Google Developers Dev Library. Then just click on View on GitHub to see the code. Contributions from the community are welcome, so please just read the README as well as the contribution guidelines for more information. And that is me. I am Ahmed Tikiwa, Senior Software Engineer in Android at Luno, and you can find me on Twitter, Ahmed_Tikiwa. And that is me.
Awesome. Just okay. Yeah. So, oh, I'm muted. Okay. So, yeah. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for this overview. It is really, really cool. Especially what I like is how you managed to more or less replicate the UI completely. So there's not a lot of difference in terms of what the XML implementation does versus what the Compose implementation does, and also like the Compose code is obviously much simpler, much easier to read and write. So yeah, this sounds really, really good. Let me take a look at YouTube to see if there are any other questions or any questions in general. So yeah, if you have any questions for Ahmed currently, this would be the time for it. If not, then as mentioned, you can follow him on Twitter, and you can probably like post some questions there. So if you get to see this presentation later at YouTube or something, then you can always follow up with questions. Yeah, and other findings, anything like exciting that you want to do besides the things that you mentioned in terms of animations and everything. Do you have plans for any new projects in Compose, maybe?
Not as yet. So I've been trying to just get up next to a point where I'm just happy, like it's fully migrated to Compose. And so yes, I am. It can get quite frustrating sometimes. Especially trying to convert certain things to Compose. It's not always easy. So for instance, the other day I wanted to have a bottom sheet layout, right? And a bottom sheet fragment dialog, sorry. So on the cost information where I was showing the cost, let me see if I can get to that screen. Yeah. So on this particular screen, my cost information is there, right? Now, if you click on the cost information, then a bottom sheet will open up with a little bit more information about that cost person, right? But using the imperative approach and even using Compose View, I was able to delegate that responsibility to the fragment in order to open up the bottom sheet dialog fragment. So obviously now I wanted to convert it to the Jetpack Compose bottom sheet dialog fragment, or at least the equivalent. And yes, that wasn't fun. Trying to find the right library or composable to use in that instance, but eventually I was able to actually do it. I actually wrote an article about it, so whoever wants to find out how I actually did it, there's an article on there, and you can also check out my repository on how I actually achieved that. So yes, so there have been certain items where I am determined to completely convert it to Compose. And yeah, so I have to take it step by step, convert little items. So right now I'm busy using, so I've managed to migrate it to Jetpack Compose in a separate branch. And now I want to use Jetpack Compose navigation, and then also using the bottom sheet as a navigation thing. But one of the things that happens in the app is that when you log in using Trackit, it uses OAuth. And so it actually goes to Trackit's website and then returns back, right? Now, that is a callback. That is a deep link. And there are certain ways that you have to do it. Not easy ways of doing it when it comes to Compose. So Compose handling that deep link, especially when you have a bottom sheet. So yes, I've had quite an adventure, and it's been fun actually, because then I'm able to write about it, to blog about it, and share that knowledge with other developers. So that has been fun, like just discovering an answer to a problem. Yeah, so yes, whoever wants to try this, it is definitely a gradual approach. You just need to be patient. There's certain things that might not work as you want them to, but if you stick at it, you will eventually get it right. So yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that from my experience. Like building some of the things 5 or 6 months ago, especially the sheets and different kinds of pop-ups, it was really hard to do that. Or at least the API was there, and you would think that by changing some implementation or some customization for this API would do one thing, but it kind of does the other. And there's like a bunch of bug trackers where either I or some of the colleagues have opened, and we were waiting for an answer for a while. But like a lot of these things that we reported as well have been fixed. So yeah, now we're kind of like looking into overall just using Compose more and a couple of more features that we want to have in the future. There is a question, by the way. So the question is, I'm not sure if you're following on YouTube as well, but basically it says, thanks for the talk. One of my issues with XML-based layout was always code reviews. So there are too many changes to understand what was updated. Is Compose better for code reviews?
Is Compose interesting. So I think it actually just depends on how the code is written. With Compose, I've noticed that it is very important to try and keep your composables as small as possible. So if you do that, then it makes code review a pleasure, because then the person can easily see what it is you've written. Sometimes it's not always easy to see. So like in my case, if I've got a screen that has got different sections of that screen, right? If I don't organize my composable well, it's all just going to look like spaghetti code. And then you're not going to enjoy reviewing the code at all. So they do recommend keeping your composables as small as possible. And also, I find that Compose now is actually much easier to read than, because also if you're used to Kotlin, which is what Compose is based in, if you're used to Kotlin and you like Kotlin, it'll be so much easier as well to also read and review, because now you're not only reviewing the logical part of the app, but also the UI part of the app. All of this, you're doing it in Compose, in Kotlin. So yes, so I find that it's actually much easier than the XML, because at the end of the day, what Compose is doing is eliminating that XML part, and now you're now including it as part of your normal Kotlin code, which is cool. So yes, to answer your question, yes, it is better for code reviews.
Yeah, one thing we notice as well, like when you have XML and you have IDs of views and different things, and if there's any kind of UI change, you have to go back from the XML to like imagining in your head what it's supposed to represent to the actual code in Kotlin, which uses those IDs, and you have to like figure, okay, is this a text view or something else? So that can be a bit hard.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. We have another question, so but I think you answered this. But yeah, the question is, how is your experience with navigation on Jetpack Compose? So this is one of the things you want to integrate, right?
Yes, and I have started it. In fact, I started it probably about 3 weeks ago or so, and I've not been able to merge my branch into the main branch yet, because it's not done. Because there are certain items. So like I mentioned, I was able to add the bottom navigation, which is very nice. I've managed to add the app bar, and I've managed to navigate between the screens using Compose navigation. That was nice. So there is also a recommended way in which you need to set up your composables. So the navigation graph is different, because we're used to creating a navigation graph in XML. In Compose, you now create them using using composables. So you have to find multiple composables as the navigation graph, essentially. So you have to create sort of like a custom navigation graph with these composables defined. And then, so the only issue that I have right now is deep linking. So I'm trying to figure that out, because my app does deep link from Trackit. When Trackit authorizes my app, it comes through as a deep link. So that has been my pain point of late. But otherwise, it has been relatively smooth integrating navigation, apart from the deep linking part.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I've not personally used the navigation, so my kind of work currently relies on us shipping components rather than shipping screens that navigate between each other. So yeah, I'm still yet to test that. I haven't used the navigation. Well, I have used the navigation in XML a bit, and I wasn't such a big fan. So hopefully the experience in Compose is a bit better.
The thing I found actually, I actually prefer the XML version of the navigation graph, because in Android Studio there's a nice tool where you can visualize and connect your views and be able to say, oh yeah, that screen goes from that screen to that screen, and you can connect it visually. Unfortunately, there isn't anything like that yet in Compose. Maybe I'll create something like that in future. Maybe someone will, but I like to visualize it like that, where I can see, oh, so those are my different screens. So your navigation graph can look a bit messy without that visual aid to it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good feature, being able to just see all the arrows and which screen can point to which screens. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get something like that in Compose soon.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, so there don't seem to be any more questions. At least I don't see them in chat. So if you do have any other questions, if you think of anything else, feel free to ping either here on the video and then we can respond to it, or Ahmed, you can also respond. Or if not there, then you can ping us on Twitter and reach out to us via social media with any questions you have, any comments, and just in general, if you have any presentation ideas, or you would like to join, GDG Osijek, just like we did here, just feel free to ping us and we'll organize something. So without further ado, I do want to thank you again for joining us. This is amazing. I really like the entire process that you did and how you explained the changes, the actual code impacts and everything like that. So how the code looked before and after, and also the visual representation of in the UI, how it looks or changes. It was really cool, and I hope that the list that you showed will keep getting smaller by the day, and that we have you on again once you merge everything together and you have another showcase that you can show with all the cool animations and everything. So yeah, again, thank you so much for joining. And do you have any final words or anything you would like to say to the audience?
Yes. So first of all, Philip, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure being able to share my journey. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for tuning in and for joining. And I hope you actually did have at least one thing which you learned from my talk. And I hope you are encouraged to use Jetpack Compose if you haven't already. And if you're hesitant to try it within your existing apps, I definitely recommend that you try it. It's just going to make things a whole lot cleaner and nice and fun. I've actually gotten to the point now where writing XML feels weird, because at work we're still using XML, and I'm like, oh, can't I write Compose yet? So yes, you get to the point where you're just excited to create things in Compose, and I hope you will all try it. And yeah, thank you again for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, again, it is really nice to hear about your experience in Compose, and I guess we'll see you next time. Thank you everyone for joining, and stay tuned for more. Bye.
Bye.